Welcome to Spinning Back Clique Retweet here at MMA Junkie. We take a spin through the biggest headlines in the sport. This week, we've got Matthew Wells, Nolan King, and Goes Garcia. So let's get right to it, guys. This past weekend, the PFL kicked off the promotion's 2021 playoffs, and there's featured bout Ray Cooper III shut out Rory MacDonald on the scorecards. Now, he's just 32. MacDonald's been fighting for 16 years at this point, and he's now just 1-3 in his past 4 fights, dating back to his run in Bellator as well. The man we like to call the Canadian Psycho has given us a ton of highlights during his storied career, but what does the future hold? Are his days as an elite fighter over at this point? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Matt, get us started.
And you got to think back, man. There was a lot of fight taken out of this man after the Robbie Lawler fight. That's the fight that everybody seems to go to as the turning point for his career. That took a lot of fight out of him, and rightly so. I mean, that was one of the best fights in the history of ever, as I believe Dana White said after the fact. So those types of battles, they're going to take something. They're going to change a fighter, man. And he's still on the younger side of things compared to a lot of fighters that are still doing it these days. But man, it's hard to point to any other major difference in his career outside of that fight, because I mean, it was an absolute war. That was a fight. I remember sitting, in the arena watching that fight, thinking, man, like these guys are going to change after this fight, and it's been pretty apparent after the fact. So he's still competitive. He's still out there able to win fights. He's just not going to be that killer that we all thought he was at one point in his career. And I think that we just have to adjust our expectations going forward. What we can expect from him.
Yeah, that's the thing about those epic battles, right? We love them, and they're amazing, and they're memories in the sport, but they take away. And Rory's not an old guy, but his body may be a little bit old at this point, right, with everything that he's gone through. So, Nolan, what do you think? I mean, are his best days behind him, or maybe we just need to give a little bit more credit to Cooper for being a little bit better than maybe we thought he was? What do you see?
Yeah, it's tough to tell. I mean, we've seen with Rory MacDonald before. I feel like ever since his UFC tenure ended and he signed with Bellator, at that point in time, there was a little bit of energy behind him, seeing what he would do in the new promotion, and quickly that fizzled out. And the storyline at the time was like, hey, does Rory want to do this anymore? I mean, he had the bad loss to Gegard Mousasi, and then he had the draw against John Fitch, and there was a tremendous amount of questions about his motivation, how much he wanted to do this, was he banged up, kind of what his deal was, because he had slowed so much, he had hit those tough results, and I felt like as the tournament progressed, he did get a little bit of a second win up until the tournament final. But since then, it's been really choppy, man. I mean, even in his wins, it's been kind of uninspired. I think the Melender fight looked like he had a little more energy in him. But seeing what happened on this past Friday and just kind of the way that Ray Cooper beat him, it's tough for me to think that he's going to get a third win. I mean, it's not impossible. Rory MacDonald is a high-level competitor. He's only 32, but there is a lot of mileage on him right now. And I think for any fighter, it's eventually you're going to fizzle out, regardless of age. We've seen some fighters peak later in their career, in their late 30s. We've seen some guys peak when they're 25, 26. So I just think with Rory, we've seen the best, and it's just a matter of, how many more rises he can have before that ultimately he does hit that point and fizzle out.
Yeah, you bring up some real good points there. Maybe it's not even so much whether he's physically done as mentally, right? Some of the things he said along the way, it made it seem like he doesn't even really want to do this anymore. And that's a huge part of it, the psychological aspect of this. So, Goes, what do you think? I mean, are we still need to be paying attention to Rory MacDonald at the highest level, or is he just another guy in the field now?
That's still a tough question for me to answer, because I think it's safe to say that we felt the fight before this, I felt like he did win that fight. The judges just didn't go his way. Now, you fast forward to last week, yeah, he was dominated, but he was dominated by a really good fighter, Ray Cooper, a guy that's underrated. I really think in the next year or so, we're going to really start to realize that Ray Cooper is not just a great fighter in PFL. He's a good fighter overall. So you can't take that away from Rory. You can't damage him too much for that. But the thing is, at the end of the day, he did get dominated, and I understand that. But there are a lot of factors going into this, the new environment, changes in training. I know COVID, the pandemic, forced him out of what Rory MacDonald's usually used to doing for training camp. So I'm not ready to dismiss him just yet. I think he can be elite in PFL, but overall, as a mixed martial artist, I think that door might have closed.
Man, you hate to see it. I mean, he's definitely a fan favorite, right? But, like you said, that one result was a little bit of a bad decision, I think, in most people's eyes. So are we looking at it differently if he's got a win there? I don't know. We'll have to see how it all plays out. Certainly he'll remain a big draw for PFL moving forward. So we'll see what's left in the tank. Got somebody that's kind of at the beginning of the career, Sean O'Malley. He's made a few statements recently that are actually quite logical in nature, but they may have riled up fans a bit when he admitted financially there's no real incentive for him to take on higher ranked opponents at this point in his career. So what do you make of this logic coming out of a fighter? I mean, is he right that the best thing to do is take the most money you can make for the basically the least troublesome opponent? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Nolan, get us started.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? And I'm not sure how much of O'Malley's comments were kind of tongue-in-cheek, if he was kidding, if he was trying to poke the trolls, if he was trying to get people going, if he was trying to get the UFC going, who knows? I know obviously he's kind of hit some bumpy negotiations with the promotion, but it is very interesting to hear that perspective. And I do think that there is, at minimum, a lot of truth to what he said. I mean, for a guy like him, his star power is growing. He's adding to his highlight reel. He's becoming must-see TV. People outside of the MMA bubble are getting to know who he is through these performances, through him fighting people that he should beat. So for him, I guess there isn't too much of a financial gain for taking on a guy that's really dangerous, like a Marab or something, for the same amount of money as he can go out there and fight Chris Matino for. I think that he's definitely hit the nail on the head there. I mean, at the end of the day, that I think a lot of fighters are motivated by the championship belts, by the posters, by the lights, by the legacy. But there is a financial aspect to this too. So I think Sean O'Malley, this is an interesting perspective that maybe we haven't heard before from a fighter. And I don't think it's one that you can really hate on him for. I think it's not that he's afraid of these big name matchups or he's avoiding them or he's looking for the easiest way to the title, but he's looking for some money along the way. So it'll be interesting to see if the UFC and him can kind of reach that agreement level where he can fight big name opponents and still get compensated what he feels he's worth.
Yeah, I always think it's imperative to make sure that we take the word afraid out of the equation, right? Like nobody's afraid on the UFC roster of anybody else, but if you can kind of manipulate the matchups into your favor and still make the same amount of money, why not? Goes, what do you think? Does this turn you a little bit to hear him say this, or is he spot on?
I think he's got a point. I think first things first, Sean has to figure out what it is he's fighting for. Like Nolan mentioned, are you fighting for a belt? Do you have that dream of holding a belt around your waist? Or are you fighting for a Ferrari, a big house? Do you want to get paid? If his dream is to make money, then yeah, I think it's a pretty good strategy. But here's where I see the hole in his plan. If you're playing poker and you pull pocket aces, that's a great card until you tell everyone you have pocket aces. I don't understand why he would let everybody know that this is indeed his plan. You don't want to show your cards to the UFC because they could instantly turn things around on you. They have that power. That's the last thing you want to do. He has been pretty vocal as of late, and I'm not so sure that his standing with the UFC is what it was maybe a year ago. Look, nobody's saying fight the number one ranked contender. Nobody's saying fight number 2 or number 3, but it might be a good idea to fight somebody at least and start building, because along with that is where the money's going to come. I think it's a good plan, but terrible execution.
That's pretty funny, right? It's a good plan. Just don't tell anybody what your plan is, and it'll probably work out a little bit better, right? And again, look, if you do get to the top, when you are a champion, you start sharing in the pay-per-view points, and that's when the real money comes in. So there is incentive, at least once you get to the very top of the list, but maybe not necessarily on the way. Matt, I don't know. What's your take out of all this crazy situation?
No, there's a lot of pluses and minuses to this, and he's not really the first person to say this. I mean, listen, this is why we have an issue with John Jones right now. Why am I going to fight Francis Ngannou for the same money? It just doesn't make sense financially. I love the fact that he's standing up for himself in that regard, and hopefully it leads to more, benefits for fighters down the road. We always talk about fighter unions and associations and things like that. Fighters taking control of their career is super important. So if he's not going to get any financial gain for taking on, the higher ranked guys, why not just continue to go out there, put more highlights on the highlight reel and do it, without, a bigger physical risk to himself. So I'm not mad at him saying it. I just hope it doesn't backfire on him. I hope it actually does, benefit him in some way, whether it be a higher financial gain immediately or, some other aspect down the road.
Yeah, it's funny. Kind of as Goes said, I'm sure the UFC doesn't like hearing this, but hey, listen, there's nothing wrong with the strategy. It's absolutely right. Make the most amount of money for the least effort possible. I think that's what everybody's trying to do. So interesting to hear it come out of Sean O'Malley's mouth. We'll see how it all plays out moving forward. Guys, Paige VanZant opened up in the latest edition of her and her husband's video blog, admitting she became quite depressed following her recent BKFC loss, and even saying, and I'll quote, I didn't want to live anymore. Now, we say all the time that the sport has the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, but what can we take out of comments like this? I mean, does something more need to be done in MMA when it comes to the health, the mental health of the athletes involved? What can we take out of this? Let's put 4 minutes and goes, get it started.
Yeah, I think mental health is something that isn't talked about as much as it should be in the sport. And it's not just isolated to a few people. You know, a lot of people are suffering through this, a lot of fighters. Paige VanZant just happens to be somebody that had enough courage to speak about it in public. But many fighters have similar feelings. This is a dangerous sport to be in, to be involved in, if you don't have the correct mindset going in and coming out of it. So I know a lot of fighters go and see sports psychologists, and I commend them for that. But to me, that's more performance-based. I think you need something, you need a support group for after the fight, how to deal with things in that regard. I hope Paige VanZant can kind of look and see the things that she's accomplished in and outside of the sport and be very proud of what she's done, because a lot of people dream of doing the things that she's done. Even if it means failure, there's so many people that just want that opportunity, and she's been able to do that. You know, not everybody's going to be able to be champion, but she's accomplished a lot of things. Fighting isn't everything. There's a life outside of fighting. So I applaud programs like MVP. You know, we have one out here at Extreme Couture. I think something like that where she can be around her peers would really benefit her a lot.
Such a hard sport, right? Because it's, I mean, so uniquely solo of an endeavor, even though you have a team around you. And when you lose, you don't just lose a game, right? You get your ass kicked in front of thousands of people. That makes it tough. And then you add into the fact that social media is such a big part of it. And man, people get nasty on social media. She mentioned it too, and it's crazy sometimes how much she gets hated on. So, Matt, what did you take out of it? I mean, these are pretty serious statements.
Very serious statements. And I mean, listen, it's hard to avoid all of the things that these trolls on the internet say. And that's really the problem, is because, like she said, you know, she's such a good person. She tries to come off as, you know, a good person. She doesn't talk trash about her opponents or anything like that. She just tries to show up, do the right things, say the right things. And for whatever reason, when she gets online, there's a lot of hate. And a lot of that is, you know, because she was thrust into the forefront, you know, based on her looks and her appearance and stuff like that, with the UFC trying to make her a bigger star than what she was before she became that. Which, I mean, listen, you can't fault her for it. I mean, she had a good little run in the UFC there for a moment. But does that mean that, you know, people should have this free reign to just go ahead and just say all the mean stuff in the book at her, like when she loses a fight? No, man. I mean, and it's not just her. Like, all these fighters are super sensitive about their careers and everything that they go to. They put their bodies through hell just to make a paycheck, and the pay isn't always that great unless if you're a select few. So there's a lot of emotions tied into this fight game that a lot of people don't see. So when people pull up their phones and, you know, get their Twitter fingers working, they're not really taking into account, like, they're talking about a real person with real feelings here on the other end. And it's really unfortunate. It's something that I hope that people will eventually realize that, hey, like, you're actually talking to a person with real feelings and real emotions, going through real things outside of the cage.
Yeah, what is she supposed to do? Tell the UFC, hey, please don't push me and promote me. I don't feel I'm deserving of this at this time. I mean, come on. You take the opportunity that's there for you. I really do feel bad for some of the way she's treated sometimes. Nolan, what do you think? I mean, I know people just want to talk about sports and have fun, but I mean, it seems like we're hearing more people talk about mental health. And again, this is a challenging sport to do it in.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you look at her and her husband, I think that having been around them at Bellator and just following their careers, I think they're two of the people that probably get the most amount of unnecessary criticism. And, you know, appearance wise, if you talk to them or you see how they interact online, they do an excellent job of just brushing it off. They've never seemed to be, you know, hindered by anything that was said. And I think they're two very strong people mentally, but they still have, you know, broken a little bit, or at least Paige has, and she came out publicly and said that. So I agree with what both Goes and Matt said. I think that mental health in MMA and combat sports, in a sport where you're supposed to be tough and all this other stuff, maybe doesn't get talked about enough. I remember John Jones saying this at one point, that his brother in the NFL, look at all the mental health stuff he had. So I think the UFC PI does have some programs, but maybe we'd like to see that expanded and more MMA fighters take advantage of things like that.
Yeah, I think you hit on it right there. I mean, the UFC is obviously going to have to lead the way here. Certainly, obviously, Paige isn't a part of the UFC anymore, but you know, if they can expand on those programs. And again, I think what we're seeing in the public right now, just continue to talk about it, continue to allow people to talk about it and discuss it and realize, hey, this is normal. You're not alone, and there are ways to get by it. So we'll see how that continues to develop in the sport. Guys, Gabriel Stevenson claimed Olympic gold in wrestling over in Japan, capping off an incredible run there for the U.S. team. And there seems to be a lot of hype around Gable potentially making the transition to MMA right now. And we know that wrestling is a great base for MMA, but it's obviously not all that you need to win. So what's the biggest career advice that you would give to Stevenson or any other Olympian looking to make their way to the sport? Is there a promotion you would tell them to chase after, maybe a team they should go train with, any methodologies or mottos they should be using? I don't know. What's the advice that you would give to any Olympian looking to make the transition to MMA? 4 minutes on the clock. Matt, get us started.
Well, I don't know what his striking looks like, so that's the first thing I would need to to know before really answering this question. But I'm going to assume that he needs to work on his striking a little bit. So the route I would go with him would be go a pro wrestling route first to build your name and build your profile up. Join the WWE, and in the meantime, get some work in where you can at like an American Top Team or something like that. They seem to do really well with wrestlers in MMA. So hey, that's a great spot for me. Build your profile in pro wrestling. That way, when you do transition over to the UFC or to another big promotion like a Bellator or something like that, people will follow you. You will bring a new fan base along with you. And hey, in the meantime, you know what? You've been working on your game behind the scenes while you're out there, giving people hip tosses and body slams. So it's something that you could do to help boost yourself before you put your body through a lot of real risk inside a real fight.
Yeah, I've seen a couple people online making this recommendation, especially for Gable. I think it makes a lot of sense. Can you imagine if he's over there in WWE, making good money, like you said, building a profile on pay-per-view, but hiring a striking coach that can train with him like full-time, that just travels around him and behind the scenes, he's taking all this. I'd love to see that. And then you're actually developing those skills. What I'd hate to hear is he goes to wrestling and is only working on wrestling, and then he makes the transition to MMA and he still hasn't done anything in the meantime. So we'll see how it all plays out. Nolan, what kind of advice would you give?
Yeah, I agree with Matt Wells. If the long road toward MMA, I think would do him best. I think not only would he be able to gradually improve his skills, work on some striking on the side here and there, probably helps him keep in shape a little bit too, but it builds up the anticipation. I mean, if this is something that's talked about for years and years, and if he goes back to college and wins again there, national championships and whatnot, I think that move to WWE will only build that more. I mean, his mentor or whatever you want to call it, somebody he looked up to, Brock Lesnar, I think laid the groundwork for that. MMA is always going to be there. He could be 32, 33. And if he were to make the jump, especially if he has a successful pro wrestling career, I mean, that's only going to make this whole ordeal bigger. It's going to make it be something that we talked about for years, and it's finally coming to fruition, all the while he's improving his skills. So to me, as much as, MMA fans might want their instantaneous, like, let's get this now, I think for him, business-wise, for him, skills-wise, it would make sense to take the longer road, but I definitely want to see it happen at some point.
Yeah, I agree. Patience, right? Like you said, you jump into the deep water. I mean, he can't compete at the UFC right now. I'm sure he'd be able to beat some people with just pure wrestling alone, but especially in Gable's case, as you said, he doesn't have to be in a rush. I mean, heavyweights, right? They can fight much later in their career, it seems. So it's interesting. I agree. Some patience might be well recommended. Goes, what do you think? What would be the best advice you would have?
I don't want to see him go to WWE, guys. I think the landscape of the heavyweight division is way different right now than it was when Brock Lesnar was able to make that transition. This heavyweight division is filled with killers. So I think what you want to do is you want to surround yourself with people that understand you. I think it was Matt that said ATT. I think that's a great spot for him. A guy like Steve Mocco, Muhammad Lawal, they can help transition that game that he has into wrestling for MMA, which I think is very, very important. You got to get a mentor. I think a guy like Daniel Cormier is a perfect guy, model a career after him, and look at what he's done. He can prepare him for what's waiting for him in mixed martial arts, but also maybe a life after mixed martial arts. Daniel Cormier seems to be a guy that could make that happen. And at ATT, you're surrounded by champions, other gold medalists. I think it's a perfect fit for him. But the last step, I think, is maybe get a couple fights on the regional scene. Because like you said, John, the UFC is no place to learn. You have to be prepared before you go in there. I think a couple regional fights, make it kind of look like Daniel Cormier's career. I think that would probably benefit him.
Yeah, that's some interesting points there. Because like I said, it would be ideal if you were in WWE, but you were kind of getting full-time MMA training. But does that really happen, right? I mean, you're going to be busy. You're going to be traveling. You're going to be probably trying to work on your wrestling spots. So are you really – that's an interesting point, too. Avoid WWE altogether if you're really serious about this MMA thing and just get serious about the MMA thing, right? We'll see what happens. I know he's a much in-demand guy right now. Guys, looking ahead to this weekend, it's a fight fan's dream. We got PFL on Thursday, we got Bellator on Friday, we got UFC on Saturday, we got action every night. Kayla Harrison versus Jenna Fabian, Chet Congo versus Sergey Karatanov, and Jared Cannonier versus Kelvin Gastelum in the headliners. But not everyone has the luxury of spending all 3 nights watching MMA. They might have other things going on, so let's narrow it down for the fine fans out there. What's one fight on any of these 3 cards outside of the headliners that absolutely should not be missed? They need to make sure and tune it in during this busy 3-day stretch. We'll put 4 minutes on the clock. Nolan, you get it started.
As much as I'd love to go with the Bellator theme of J.J. Wilson versus Adam Boric, which I think is a must-see fight, Brandon Royval versus Alexander Pantoja definitely is the one that jumps out to me. I mean, it has all the makings of the best of the flyweight division. You have a very exciting scrambler, grappler type against a kind of well-rounded striker, grappler type as well. So I think it's going to be a full, well-rounded martial arts fight. I expect some quick scrambles, some knockdowns, some madness. I mean, Brandon Royval, every time he fights, seems to get in some sort of weird back and forth battle, puts himself in bad positions to gain better ones. I love watching both those guys fight, and I think it has some implications in the flyweight division. Royval hasn't fought for a little while. Pantoja's always been at the top of the division. I think flyweight right now has quickly gone from the division that nobody cared about to the one that everybody always circles. So I think that if I were to bet money on a fight of the night for that UFC card, it would definitely be Brandon Royval versus Alexander Pantoja.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great fight. And as you said, the UFC's flyweight division continues to get more and more exciting. And, as the champion mentioned not too long ago, Brandon Moreno, there's not really a clear number one contender right now. So you got a handful of people that are all trying to take that step up and say that they're that guy. So that's a great one. That's certainly one to tune in for. Goes, how about you? What's one that shouldn't be missed?
I like Clay Guida versus Mark Madsen, guys. I mean, have you ever known a Clay Guida fight to be boring? They're all pretty exciting. And you know what you're going to get from him. He's going to run at Madsen. He's going to unleash hell. This is exactly the guy that you need to kind of figure out where we are with Mark Madsen and see somebody to push him and know what we have with him, because we know that he has a great background, but is mixed martial arts his sport? And little by little, I'm starting to see that I think he is going to become somebody pretty big in this sport. He's a cerebral fighter. He's smart. I don't know that. I mean, he's a guy that's going to exploit your weaknesses, but he's also a guy that can maybe get wrapped up in the other guy's game plan. And that's what Clay Guida does a lot, right? He comes, he pushes forward, and he gets in your face. So this fight's going to be what I like to call controlled chaos, where it's going to be technical at points. It's going to be chaos at other points, but both guys know exactly what they want. It's going to be a fun fight. That's going to be my pick for this weekend.
I like that one, man. I got to be honest, when they announced that fight, my first reaction was like, what? You're putting Guida against the undefeated young prospect? And then for all the reasons you said, I was like, nope, I like that matchmaking a lot. So I'm definitely looking forward to that fight. Matt, what's one that you're looking out for this weekend that shouldn't be missed?
Well, I'm embracing the chaos altogether here, because I think this one could be chaotic. It could be sloppy. It could be a quick knockout. I'm not sure, but I'm here for this one. And it's William the Nightmare Knight and Fabio with the fantastic nickname, the Water Buffalo, Sherrod. Give me this light heavyweight matchup on the prelims of the UFC card. 2 Dana White Contender Series veterans. They'll be going at it. I mean, they're both coming off losses, so they're going to be real hungry too. So I'm excited to see how this one plays out. We both 2 physically imposing dudes. Like I said, it could be a quick knockout, or it could just be a sloppy 15 minutes of light heavyweight stumbling around the octagon. I'm not sure how it plays out, but I'm here for it, and I'm just I don't know. I'm excited for this one. It could be sloppy. It could be a mess. I don't care. I'm here for that one.
Hey, sometimes just the chaos makes it fun. You're absolutely right. The Water Buffalo, the Nightmare. I mean, anytime they're getting together, it could be absolute chaos. Just goes to show you, this UFC card, I think there are some hidden gems on this UFC card that'll make it a pretty entertaining card overall. Listen, I do want to say, and you touched on it, but I do want to say, Adam Boric versus J.J. Wilson, and that's a high-quality fight. And I like the fact that you kind of were looking for something a little more adventurous, but you talk about a high-level fight. That's a high-level fight between 2 absolute studs that deserve to be in title contention. So I think that's one that you definitely don't want to miss. And I'm going to throw one more out there for you, because I always got to give a little CFFC love. But Jamel Jones doing his thing over there in PFL, jumped in at the last minute as a late replacement, man, and he's now in the playoffs against Bruno Capelozzi, looking to fight for $1 million. Don't miss that one. You guys, 3 nights in a row. It'll be a busy week. I know we're all looking forward to it. We got a lot of things to cover. There'll certainly be a ton of storylines, and we'll talk about them all next week on Spinning Back Clique.